Well, we have 4 days to kill before we get to the World Series. And like, I understand that you can't manipulate the schedule because we were prepping for game 6, game 7, but the Yankees took care of it in five, and then the Dodgers took care of it in six. So now we're going to look back on what's happened the last 3 weeks and talk about the guys whose quote unquote stock improved the most in the postseason. And I know Aram has a disclaimer before we get into that, but it is going to be cool to kind of look at, who like increased the value of their perception as a player as we go into 2025. Jack Aram, Just Baseball Show for Tuesday, October 22nd. As always, it is presented by BetMGM, and they have something new for the postseason. BetMGM Sportsbook account holders who opt into the bullpen jackpot promotion and place a straight bet of at least $10 on their choice of any MLB player to hit a home run will win a share of a daily $50,000 BetMGM bullpen jackpot if the player they wagered on hits a home run that lands in an MLB team bullpen. Pricing will be paid out in bonus bets that expire in 7 days. That offer will be available every day throughout the postseason, and customers will need to place a $10 or more wager on any MLB player to hit a home run. If the player hits a home run that lands in an MLB team bullpen on that day, they win a share of the $50,000 daily prize. Make sure to use code JUSTBASEBALL, all caps, one word, for that first bet offer up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your wager loses to get started. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. It must be 21 years or older. Terms and conditions apply. You did as close to a red eye as you could possibly do without it being a red eye. I understand the Pacific to Eastern just kind of stinks, but that was what? That was 5 p.m. Pacific to like 1:30 a.m. Eastern?
Yeah, with the connection in between, and actually the connection was in Midway. Never used
Oof.
that. It's like the ugly like step sibling. I feel like in Chicago when it comes to the two airports, right? You have O'Hare and then you have Midway.
It's
So
the
did the
LA, yeah, it's the LA Angels of Chicago airports.
it's like the Clippers. The Clippers are better now,
The
right?
Clippers are better. It's like they're
Yeah,
the Angels. I'm not
yeah.
going to say the Mets because the Mets are
No, the
also,
Mets are good.
yeah.
So yeah, it was interesting. It's tough getting back. Not a lot of direct flights that are affordable from Phoenix to South Florida. So got that one done, but was able to hammer out a lot of AFL notes. So go check that out on justbaseball.com.
Yep.
I've been just compiling every couple of days my notes from the Arizona Fall League, and I thought this time around it was a little bit more detailed. You could tell I had a lot of time on my hands. So yeah, got that flight done, and hopefully going to be down here for a little while, aside from a quick trip to New York for the World Series for a couple games. So I'm excited for that.
Yep.
But other than that, I plan on not traveling much for the next couple months. I'm excited to just be hunkered down here in Florida. We have some fun like little baseball things going on here too. We have I think a Caribbean series.
Yep.
Like Lidom versus some of the best Venezuelan and Puerto Rican teams. I think it's a really cool name. It's basically collision of giants in Spanish. So I'm pumped for that too. So I'm gonna be hunkered down here and looking forward to it.
Well, so that'll be in Miami, and then I think in New York as well. Early November in New York, and then they come down to Miami, or is that
Yeah,
something else? It might be a Litem. It might just be like a Litem
I
series
think
where
New
you have
York's
four.
just lied them. And just so people know, like a lot of former big leaguers, some current big leaguers that still want more reps, a lot of top prospects, and then a lot of players that you're like, wait, that guy's still playing baseball. And
Junior
that's
Lake.
why I love the lied them.
I think Junior Lake hit in front of Jordan Lawler for Tigres de
Yeah, like
Licey.
that's all you need to know. This is awesome. That's absolutely awesome. I think it's just lied them in New York. I might be wrong, but I think it's Choque de Gigantes is what it's called. So it's
That's
Collision
in
of
Miami.
Giants. Yeah, it's in Miami, November 8th to the 10th. I will be all over that.
Okay, yeah, I think it's probably just Litem in New York, and I want to say
Yeah.
that's like November 2 and 3 or something like that. Um, Speaking of different locations for traditional baseball, I want to throw you some possibilities that were reported by the Tampa Bay Times about where the Rays are going to play
It's
baseball.
funny. I actually wanted to bring this up on the show too. I was just talking about this with Ellie when we
Yeah.
were walking to get coffee. Just like, I wonder where they're going to play.
I mean, dude, fascinating reporting from Mark Topkin, who is the authority on Tampa Bay Rays baseball. Like, Mark will have everything before anybody else, it does seem. But, Mark listed some possibilities in the Tampa Bay Times, and I want to roll through, things that he was saying. And he did not, mention the finalists or anything like that. He did call a list of about 50 locations a quote unquote short list, which I'm like, I get it at the end of the day. Like,
What's the cutoff for short list?
That so watch list in like college football awards voting, I feel like it's always like 50 names, and then they go down to like semifinalists and finalists. I feel like a short list has to be when you get to the semifinalist stage. I would say that the cutoff for a short list, quote unquote, is 25. But when it comes to like where you're playing baseball for 3 years, I guess 50 can be considered a short list.
That's just a list.
Yeah, it might just
Anyway,
be.
continue.
You're right. So, some of the some of the 50 possible locations on this short list or list were Al Lang Stadium in St. Pete, Baycare Ballpark, which is the Phillies spring training complex in Clearwater, Dunedin's TD Ballpark, which is the Blue Jays spring training facility, which we saw the Toronto Blue Jays play at when they were dealing with all the COVID concerns, and it was tough to get back and forth from Canada, etc. Steinbrenner Field in Tampa, which is the Yankees spring training affiliate. The others that jumped out here were current AAA parks. Durham, which is their AAA affiliates ballpark, beautiful ballpark in Durham. Do they do that? Nashville and Charlotte are on the table. I saw San Juan, Puerto Rico was listed as a possibility in the article. That feels a little tough there.
That's a little ridiculous. As cool as that would be for the community there, and I'm sure they would love that.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
like a hurdle.
That sounds like a major, major hurdle. Interesting one that Mark said, maybe in what would be an ironic twist, even Olympic Stadium in Montreal.
Oh,
That would be
that
hilarious.
also sounds like a hurdle too.
No, I that
That's
sounds awesome. I love Montreal, and I would make sure to get up there and see that. I thought a fascinating location that he mentioned. The largest stadium in the U.S. without a major league team is Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, Nebraska, 24,000 seat home of the College World Series. The other one that seems like it could be a leader is Disney's Wide World of Sports in Orlando. I saw that there could be schedule hurdles because of the large amount of youth baseball events that are already scheduled there. I feel like youth baseball events would understand if they took a backseat to the Tampa Bay Rays.
yeah.
There's going to need to be some schedule manipulation here. What do you feel like is their best bet in terms of type of place to play?
So I saw Hard Rock Stadium's an option. Is that
Really?
I don't know if that was one of them on that specific list, but I saw a different article where they mentioned that. I've had a recurrent dream that I'm back at that old stadium, like the old Pro Player Stadium, and watching a ball game, because that is like my just fondest memories of baseball is
Is
watching
real
Dan
quick is
Ugla. Sorry,
right.
sorry, go ahead.
No, is pro player, is that Joe Robbie? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, Pro Player, Joe
Okay.
Robbie, Dolphin Stadium, Sun Life Stadium, Landshark Stadium. There's a few more in there. They
Holy
had a lot of different names for a while, but I had this recurrent dream of like continuing to like go back to a game there and just watch. I don't even remember who's on the field. I just always wanted to go back to that crappy football stadium
Yep.
because I just had there's so much nostalgia to that. If that ever were to happen, I would not miss a game. I would go watch the Rays play at Hard Rock Stadium every single day. But I feel like that's probably not going to be very feasible, especially because it's only a partial roof and the weather is quite brutal throughout the baseball season. There'd be a lot of rain delays, but they played there before, and I remember navigating those rain delays with my dad all the time when the Marlins played there. It would be really funny if they built it right back up, have the teal monster and everything, and get going with the old kind of setup. It would honestly make my life complete. But realistically, I really do think that Steinbrenner Field makes the most sense. It is kind of bizarre given the like that's turned into a nice little rivalry here. The Rays and the Yankees, they
For sure.
clearly like they don't get along on the field, but from a logistical standpoint, I was thinking about it from this lens. Like, yeah, you don't want to pick one of these stadiums which is like 7,000, 8,000 seats. 11,200 seats, and maybe you can even bring in a few more. That's kind of close to what they were drawing on a lot of days. I know the reported attendance can be a little bit higher, but I'd say the vast majority of Rays games they were hovering right around 11,000 to 15,000
Yeah.
fans. So that feels like it could be the closest to accommodating the fandom, and it's only about 21 miles northeast of Tropicana Field. So like that seems like the best option to me. And obviously that's a really, really nice ballpark. And I just think from a seating perspective, because a couple thousand makes a big difference,
Yeah.
especially when we're talking about 8,000 to 11,000, right? Like that's a big chunk. That's almost a third of it. So I think that area makes the most sense. And you're still going to keep a lot of your local fans being able to actually go attend those ball games might even actually be easier for a lot of them to get to be honest. That's a big problem with the Rays attendance is actually the accessibility of the Trop.
I was going to say, so you said 21 miles north of Tropicana Field. Like now you have the opportunity to see the Tampa Bay Rays actually play in Tampa, Florida. I think it's across the highway from Raymond James. Like it's literally right there. They could essentially share parking lots with the Buccaneers, and we see that in a bunch of different places. Like that's the deal in Kansas City. Kauffman and Arrowhead share parking lots, and it works. Kauffman gets a lot of people out there. It's kind of nice to have that sports complex. We were just out in Seattle, right? Like T-Mobile and Lumen Field share parking lots. That can work. Um, I would be curious to see that. I know that there was a little bit of a hang up of like, oh, are the Rays really going to use the Yankees facility for this? At the end of the day, if you're pissed off about branding, spend some money and change the branding during that season. I understand that
Yeah,
the
you're
Tampa
saving the money on
Tarpons,
a new roof. Like
exactly.
just get over it.
Yeah,
Also, like it's circumstances, man. Like shit happens. It's really unfortunate what's happened, but like you got to make do with the situation. And realistically, it feels like that might be the most feasible. Yeah, you might have some Yankees logos here or there. You'll survive. Just play
yeah,
baseball. Like
yeah.
I that part I just don't totally get.
And I promise
Is
you,
it
it's not
better
going to
to
feel like a road game.
yeah, like you're gonna have your home crowd there. Like, does it make more sense to play somewhere where you're gonna have none of the locals? And yeah, it's not Yankee quote unquote branding, but like you're in Charlotte or something like that, and like there's like no local fans there.
Yeah.
I think to your point, like the local fans will actually kind of offset the branding more than just being in a neutral-ish site and not really having many of your actual home fans at that ballpark. I think Durham makes a lot of sense too. But the idea, I think it's just a lot more feasible to displace or at least adjust the schedule of a low A team versus a triple A team. I know you can speak to that. A lot more going on and even more money at stake with a triple A ball club compared
Yeah.
to single A where there's almost nobody at these games anyways. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen games at Steinbrenner Field during the low A season. Like when I'm watching George Lombard highlights, like there ain't anybody in the stands there.
Right.
Like it's you're not changing much there. So I think that's the easiest aspect of it too, right? It's a low A situation versus a triple A that you're working with in Charlotte or in Durham, and it's the same thing with the Marlins. Like as of now, the Marlins and the Rays, if they were to try to use Lone Depot, they overlap on like half of their home games. It's just not. It'll be way too difficult to do.
Yeah.
So I think it makes the most sense to not use one of those AAA teams stadiums and take advantage of a low A ballpark that's really a spring training ballpark that seats way more than any other will because it's the home of the Yankees. It's the only reason why it seats 11,000 and not 8,000 is because
Right.
it's the Yankees spring training facility. It just is what it is. Would you rather sell another few thousand tickets most games,
Yeah.
or would you rather it not say Yankees and have several thousand less fans there? I think that does seem to make the most sense,
If that wasn't a rhetorical question, I would sell more tickets. I
especially if you're
hope
the
that's abundantly clear.
Rays.
Yeah. I'm totally with you on that front. And I don't know, just speaking to like the feasibility, I think it's kind of one and the same. The only thing that I feel like would be easier is time of game changes. Minor league baseball, you have the 6 game series, right? You have the full week series, Tuesday through Sunday, you're going to be at the same spot against the same team. That schedule is not necessarily like malleable, but at the end of the day, if Tampa needs to call Durham its home ballpark, then hey, like this works, Durham can, play more day games or something. I will say the promotional aspect of AAA ball and low A ball could not be more different.
Yes.
Like Durham is going to draw a lot of people for a promotion. The Florida State League could run the funniest promotion ever, and they're still only going to get 800 people in the door.
Yes.
So my thought on that is, sorry, low A team can run, craziest promotion. So my thought on that is, don't fuck with your AAA team. Play them in Tampa at Steinbrenner Field. And I think Tampa, the Tarpons, can draw a little bit better, actually, if you adjusted, hey, the Rays are at home, the Tarpons are at home. Each of those games is going to be a 1 o'clock game before a 7 o'clock game for the Rays. Or the Rays play a day game. Tampa that night is going to play a 7 o'clock game. You can
Yeah.
do that and have it function as like an opening act, right? Hey, get here early, see the low A game, and then stay for the Rays game at 7 o'clock. It's nice, you can build that. So I do think that Steinbrenner Field, as unfortunate as it is
Yeah.
the best possible scenario.
The name does make it brutal though. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the broadcasters always have to say coming at you from Steinbrenner Field. The other one that the last one I just wanted to mention is in actually ballpark I played in. It was one of the coolest. I don't know if you ever got the Wide World of Sports. Did you ever play in those tournaments there in the
No,
Wide World of Sports?
no, never did. My youth was spent at Grand Park in Indianapolis, was spent at bunch of them in Cincinnati. I never did the Cooperstown thing. I never
Ooh.
did the JetBlue thing.
Oh.
And I never did the Cooperstown thing.
Oh, well, honestly, one of my favorite like experiences was you made it deep enough into one of the tournaments. You'd get to play in that, Wide World of Sports complex, the stadium there that I think used to be the home of it used to be the Brave Spring Training Complex, and then they got a much nicer new one.
Yeah.
But it's still really nice and seats a lot of people and has a lawn down the side that they could probably bring in more seats. It's in Kissimmee, so it's about probably an hour and a half away from the Trop,
Yeah, but we
but really
mentioned
cool area. And I think like you can kind of build around the Disney thing, and I think make that a little bit more common. And nobody plays there right now. Like nothing goes on. It's just used for legit tournaments, like when we were
right.
kids,
So
like
that's
that.
what I was saying at the outset. It was like, hey, that could be there, but there's an influx of like youth events. There are a bunch of youth events, and it would, you would have to adjust around that. But I think you can
Fuck them
adjust around that.
kids. Just
Yeah.
just just play there.
Yeah. Did MJ say that, or was that just a meme?
I don't know. I was wondering that if he ever actually, it's probably just a meme. No way he said that. And also, I was just sharing about how it was a memory like I'll always have, and I enjoyed it. And just, yeah, let's take that away from the next generation of baseball players who will really enjoy that. Yeah. So if it does take away from that, that is probably an issue. And I know you'd be surprised. Like, obviously, having a Major League Baseball team there will make you a lot of money. Those tournaments, though, I don't think they're too far
Oh,
off
dude.
with how much perfect game and some of these entities bring in
You
off of
think
these
about
youth baseball tournaments.
there are hundreds of warm bodies that come there. Like they may make more money like doing the youth tournaments.
Yeah. So is Steinbrenner Field the final answer? My vote, if I had one, would be Hard Rock, just because I would kill for that.
Yeah.
But realistically,
There's a
it
lot of
seems like
bias there. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
my final answer is Steinbrenner Field.
yeah. Let's see what they do. Let's see if the Yankee thing really holds them back.
Yeah, I could see that. All right, let's jump into these. And what we're doing, again, a reminder, is guys that have been eliminated to this point. So we're talking about it's almost like Pro Bowl rosters. We're talking about everybody that isn't on the Dodgers or the Yankees. We've got a list of 10 guys that we feel like, quote unquote, improved their stock in the postseason. One of these guys played 3 games. Other guys played through the wild card up until getting eliminated in the NLCS in game 6. So, like, there's a 55 AB sample that we're going to talk about, and then there's like a 15 AB sample that we're going to talk about. At the end of the day, the postseason has more eyeballs on it than any regular season Major League Baseball game you have on the calendar. And some of these guys introduced themselves to the broader lens of baseball fans to an accentuated degree. However, I know you want to offer a disclaimer. There's like, it's really hard to draw this, oh, this guy's a way better player now because of 10 good games or 6 good games.
Yeah, I think there's a level of okay, this guy keeps his heart rate down and is comfortable in the big situations. And oh wow, I didn't know he was capable of putting that kind of swing on a ball there. Like there's definitely moments of that, but there's also a lot of confirmation bias because you mentioned like, hey, we're dialed in on every little pitch a lot more than we normally are. But I did think also what Pena did for the Astros in that World Series MVP run and everything like that. I think there was a level of kind of overrating Pena the player because you saw what he did and like, oh, this guy could be Correa, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
let's see what he does over 162, right? Like, and I think that, like, I think Vientos, for example, we're going to talk about him. Like, I think he's going to be a 30 home run threat every single year and things like that. But
Yeah.
I could also see people very easily getting carried away with maybe what Mark Vientos could be, where like if Pete Alonso leaves in free agency, it's, oh, well, Vientos can replace him. Maybe the Pete Alonso you got the last couple of years, but not, peak Pete Alonso. So like that's where I think sometimes in the postseason we can get really jazzed up and then, kind of forget that, hey, it was just 10 games or it was just 8 games and guys can get really hot for 8, 10 games. And maybe that doesn't totally change the outlook on them as a player. I'm always going to side with the large sample, but that said, there were several players that did some things in this postseason that, I didn't even really know that they were capable of, which,
Yeah.
or they'd been out for a little bit or had been struggling for a little bit and look like they're back to who they are. So
Yes.
both of those things I think are very valid, and context is always very important, I think, in these kind of conversations.
Yeah, no doubt. So I will give you just a couple names that we considered as an example and tell you why they're not on the final list of 10. And this is like in no particular order. Like the guy we're going to talk about last is, I think, the clear cut number one. And that spoiler alert, that's Mark Vientos. But like
Yeah.
everybody else is just like, hey, like they performed well relative to the expectations that were set for them going into the postseason. They exceeded those, and it was a net positive. A couple other guys that I think net positive. Stephen Kwan as a table setter. Like, we knew this guy was an all-star. We know that this guy is better than Luis Arraez. I know that's been a hot topic of conversation at this point, but he exceeded the expectations that I had for him in the postseason. And like, I just wanted to give him some shine. A couple other guys that fall into that bucket as well were, I mean, Luis Severino, I thought, he sort of kind of leveled up, but he was also really good during the course of the season. I thought Jose
Yeah.
Quintana had a good postseason, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say Sevy was more just like validating what we had already seen, where it was
Yeah.
like, okay, he didn't get to the postseason and just hit a wall. From an innings perspective, or just from a leverage perspective, like he was still the same guy that we saw that really trusted his stuff through the regular season, and I think it just validated the breakout or return to it's not really a breakout. I would say return to greatness that we saw. So I think that's a side of it too, where sometimes you have some players that had these special years, and then this is like that cherry on top in terms of, okay, now they're even doing it in high leverage and in big spots while they're as tired as they've ever been. I think that also is a huge part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Two other guys that I had that did not make the final list of 10. Cole Reagan's 10 innings, a one-run ball. That was across two starts in the wild card and the DS. At the end of the day, like we were kind of texting back and forth about it. Reagan's was really good in the postseason, but I think we knew he was near ace caliber already.
Yeah, it was just a matter of, okay, which Reagans are we getting? But,
Yeah.
we got the good Reagans that we saw for the majority of the year. I wondered maybe if he hits a wall or something like that, just again, because this has been a long season for him and everything like that, first postseason. But I mean, he was phenomenal, and that's kind of what we expected. So yeah, not much perspective changes there.
No, and then the other guy that jumped out that I think could be on this list, I think is also just a clear cut number 11 here is Bo Brisky of the Detroit Tigers. I think Brisky, we talk about the bullpen and the mastery of AJ Hinch and everything. He was turning to a Foley, he was turning to a Holton, he was turning to a Vest. Brisky was the best of the bunch, and Brisky was not considered the best of the bunch coming into the postseason. I think we ID'd Holton and Foley as the guys that are going to be like, this is the shutdown. This is the Cade Smith and Class A thing, but for Detroit. And Brisky turned out to be the one that could go two scoreless in K4, like that kind of guy.
Yeah, no, I mean he's a guy I'm very excited to see what he can do now in a full season next year. And I think again it was just more runway of validating what he had already started to do. I think throughout this season, especially in the back half. So definitely it was an impressive. I think another guy that you look at that bullpen now. I mean I trust him, and the bullpen arms performing in the postseason. Like sometimes that I think can be a little bit more believable because it's like they only have to do the same thing in the regular season again too, which is empty the tank for one or two innings and have loud stuff. Like I think that's more consistently transferable.
Yeah. We are going to get into that list at 10. Before that, we'll take a break. First guy that we want to talk about is a Cleveland Guardian, and he may have a clear runway after this offseason. I know that there's been a lot of dialogue around Josh Naylor and his future employer, but I think what Kyle Manzardo did in 19 postseason ABs probably makes the Cleveland Brass feel a bit more comfortable moving off of Naylor, who's projected to be around $12 million next year in his final year of arbitration. Kyle Manzardo, 9 games, 10 total bases. He had that big homer, drove in two. At the end of the day, like small sample, but he did have 9 hits or 6 hits in 9 games, and two of them went for extra bases. Manzardo looked very comfortable too.
Yeah, no, that's I think when we see situations like that where it's a guy that maybe wasn't playing every day down the stretch, right? A guy that was kind of up and down a little bit, and then brought up to help them, make that push and absolutely earned it with the way that he swung it down the stretch of the major league season, and through the AAA stint when they sent him there. Like it was just more of a look at a guy that I think had come up to the big leagues and it looked much more polished than the last time we had seen him. But then had some still ups and downs. So in that really tough situation against the Yankees to be able to do what he did, and I mean he hit safely in four straight to close it out. And you mentioned the extra base side of things too, but not striking out either. That's what he always was in the minor leagues. And then you saw the swing and miss creep in a little bit as it does for so many hitters when they just try to get acclimated to the freakish pitching that meets you at the big league level. But
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned comfortable. Like way more selective, and that was the other thing that kind of got away from him in his big league stint, where he was much more selective, low 20% chase rate guy throughout the minor leagues,
Yeah.
and then that chase rate crept up in the big leagues, and then in the playoffs, he wasn't pressing at all. He let the game come to him, and the chase rate was low. The AABs, he seemed to be in control of them, and you can tell when a guy looks uncomfortable, right? Like a young hitter looks uncomfortable in the postseason. The at bats are totally out of their control. I didn't feel that at all with Manzardo, and yeah, small sample here, but I think in terms of just seeing him look much more like the Manzardo we'd always seen in the minor leagues, I
Yeah.
felt like he was doing exactly that with the stakes being the highest they ever were. So
Yeah.
that does make me feel really confident. I already felt confident given that he came back from AAA looking much more like that Manzardo we saw in the Rays system, and and just continuing to climb through the minor leagues. But to do that now at the biggest stage, I do feel good about Manzardo being that first baseman of the future, and I don't really see a reason why they need to pay a Josh Naylor 12 plus million, but that's
No.
for another time.
Yeah, and move him to another like organization that is willing to do it. Like the Guardians, they can spend $12 million very creatively. I have a lot of confidence in that. So it's like, why not just do that and go grab some more solidified starting pitching at that price point and run out of Manzardo? Because, I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how the puzzle works next year with DeLauder being essentially ready. Like he's
Yeah,
he's likely going to break
I,
camp. So
I love Noel getting some reps at first
yeah,
too. He could spell the short side of the platoon. Noel's like a good first baseman. I actually think
yeah.
he's pretty good there. So like
So
you have that platoon that gives DeLauder more opportunity in the corner outfield. I think they're in a really good spot there with the young talent that we're seeing.
and they're in a cheaper spot. And I
Yeah,
know that we, consistently shit on teams for not getting more expensive, but for the Guardians, this makes a lot of sense to cut that cost.
can't pretend that they're not going to do it.
Exactly. Another Cleveland Guardian, and he started the process of proving a lot of doubters wrong, myself included. Brayan Rocchio, the shortstop. I mean, I was starting to really lack confidence that this guy was ever going to hit at the major league level. I know it's only 10 games, but he was 11 for 33 with three extra base hits. He walked, what, five times, Cade seven. He had a 906 OPS in his 10 postseason games, and there were some big swings sprinkled in there. I'm not saying that Rocchio is the shortstop next year. I'm not saying that he is a guy moving forward, but I look at Brayan Rocchio, if he is the opening day shortstop for the Guardians in 2025, just a little bit differently than I would if he did not have this postseason
Oh,
performance.
it shifted from at least, it's about not totally changing your perspective on a player from a, small stretch and a small sample. But I mean, I was with you like, hey, they can't give this guy consistent run next year. And I think with at least what he did in the postseason, it was like one last gasp here
Yeah.
where I think it's going to buy him some more time. And,
Yeah.
and, and it should, because
I think
he
it bought
looked
him
like he's
3 months.
yeah, it absolutely did. He struggled with the glove at points, but he's still going to be a good defender, and I trust that to always ultimately be a strength for him.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was a bad year for him, point blank, period. And so for him to have this last gasp here late in the season, I think that does help. I do think that there's a level of the fact that hey, I mean, he's hitting ninth in this playoff series, and I think the Yankees were going right after him, and he took advantage of that. Sure, but that's exactly what he could do next year too. If you pick it well at shortstop, hit ninth, and just have a low 700s OPS, you can be a valuable player for them. So like I think that's all they really want from him. He was a low 600s OPS this year, and that's a
Yeah.
big difference. So I think it gives him a little bit more time, but I don't know if I've changed my uh, perspective on him as a player yet off of that. But it does at least say, hey, we got to see this through a little bit. Maybe something clicked for him.
We're staying in the AL Central for three more guys and two more Cleveland Guardians, actually. But I do want to go to a Tiger here. Parker Meadows, man, like I think Parker Meadows proved that he is the opening day center fielder for the Detroit Tigers next year. And I wasn't firmly doubting that, but it started to creep into my mind. Like at the end of the day, this guy was optioned this year, and it did not look good at all. And I know that it was good down the stretch, but the fact that he came up in big moment after big moment, he only got what 29 plate appearances in the postseason, but in 7 games he had 269 with an 807 OPS. He did have a big homer. He did steal 3 bags, and he played awesome, awesome defense. Couple of big catches. I thought Meadows was the pleasant surprise in that Tiger lineup. I know that Kerry Carpenter is Barry Bonds, but I feel like we knew that Kerry Carpenter was Barry
Yes.
Bonds already. He
Yeah.
didn't show us anything new. We were just like, wow, I'm excited to see this. Meadows, I feel like at least showed us something a little bit new.
I think for me, it was more of almost validating the improvements that we saw when he came back from AAA, where it
Yeah.
was just, okay, he's continuing to do that same thing that we saw that we're like, oh, wow, Parker Meadows is here. And then seeing that through the end of the regular season, that's one thing. But, to keep building on that and doing that in the playoffs, that's one where it does validate what we were already seeing. So that's where he kind of files under that bucket. And I mean, he's their everyday center fielder, no doubt, going into next year. He elevates the ball consistently. He continued to do that in the playoffs, and you saw the speed be a dynamic aspect. And like sometimes you'll see these kind of players that the speed and the defense are a big part of their game, and then all of a sudden the playoffs are a little bit a little gun shy when it
Yeah.
comes to stealing, and maybe the defense is they're almost a little paralyzed, and so those instincts aren't quite as good, and it doesn't look like it's the same strength that we had seen. Like Parker Meadows was comfortable going on the base paths. He was comfortable out in the field. Like he was leaning into that dynamic, explosive athlete side of things that I think to me says he's really comfortable with what he can do and how he can impact the game.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. We go back to the pitching side. Matt Boyd of the Cleveland Guardians and former Tiger going to Cleveland. Number one, like this is a guy that I really want to get on this show because he's so stupidly thoughtful with every interview that I've seen from him. Have you seen all these clips of Boyd
No,
so far?
no,
I've
I
gone
have
through and
not
watched
watched
like the
Matt
full
Boyd
interview.
interviews.
But like
No.
I found myself doing it and I was like, wow, you're insanely thoughtful. And this is a guy that has a ton of perspective because he's dealt with injury, he's dealt with sometimes failure at the major league level, and I just feel like this guy. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. And Tigers fans, Guardians fans, help me out if you're listening to this. Like, how is this guy not an all-time fan favorite? I feel like he was in Detroit, and it was kind of hard for Tigers fans to watch what he did in the postseason with Cleveland. But Matt Boyd was awesome for the Cleveland Guardians, and he was essentially an opener, and he was a damn good one. 11 and 2/3, 7 hits, 1 run. He K'd 14. Opponents hit 175 against him. I'm not saying that he's the 2 behind Bybee next year, but I didn't know that this guy should have been getting starts coming into the postseason, and it was a great move from Stephen Vogt, and he proved it right.
I mean, wasn't it a minor league deal that he signed this year, or was it
Uh,
a big league minimum?
that's a good question. Let me go to his spot track.
Because in the meantime, like this is a rare instance, I think, where the postseason performance was enough to look at him and say, okay, this might be a different guy, especially because he barely had a chance to throw in the regular season. I mean, he made his first game setting appearance at the ACL, like the complex league in mid July. Like, so that was already after the All-Star break. So he didn't have a lot of runway to get going. And then in his regular season, he only threw 39 and 2/3 innings. So the additional, 11 and 2/3 innings was actually a lot. It's a third of a season.
Right.
And you mentioned that he kind of started as an opener in the playoffs. And then I think by the end, it was, hey, when we saw his last outing, against the Yankees, we kind of expected him to go 4 or 5 because he was so dominant in the 2 innings against the Tigers first time or the second time out, and he was really good in the 4 and 2/3 as well. So it was like, I think they're going to let him go 4 or 5 innings again, and that's exactly what they did. I mean, not a lot of guys were going 5 innings in the postseason. Even if your name was Tanner Bybee, you weren't going
Right.
5 innings very often. And here's Matt Boyd, making it easy on Stephen Vogt to leave him in for 5. I think with what he did, seeing him healthy and what he's able to do in terms of just I think the pitchability. Clearly, you said he's thoughtful, like the feel for the changeup. I feel confident about this guy. I mean, you can't really guess on the health, but being able to be a solid rotation piece for the Guardians next year, and they need all the starters they can get with how thin we've talked about this rotation getting.
Yeah, it was a major league deal that he signed. It was like prorated. He signed it on June 29, but he signed a 1-year major league deal, and he was immediately placed on the IL. So the Guardians I think they trusted this guy's ability to bounce back, and damn, did he bounce back. So
Yep.
he was as surprising as pretty much anybody. A guy that I feel like solidified himself as a top 5 to 10 pitcher reliever in Major League Baseball this postseason was Cade Smith. I think the numbers were misleading. 3.6 ERA in 10 innings in the postseason. That doesn't do Cade Smith justice. Starting in the DS, Cade Smith, 4 outs, 4 Ks, no hits. 5 outs, no hits, 2 Ks. 1 out, 1 K. 4 outs, 1 run on just a simple knock. He K'd 2. 5 outs, no runs, 3 Ks. 5 outs, no hits, 2 Ks. Perfect inning with a K. And then that blow up against the Yankees, but he bounced back with two-thirds scoreless. Like this guy's game log, and every time he came into the game, I had supreme confidence. I had supreme confidence with Clase until he got blown up.
Yeah.
And then he got blown up again. And then he got blown up again. Gaddis, like, I kind of felt like he was tight roping at certain points. And I'm not just saying that because of the Soto homer. Like, Cade Smith felt like the untouchable one in that
Yeah.
Guardians bullpen. And I know he led all relievers in F4 this year, but I was still surprised that he was the one that looked like the untouchable one.
Yeah. And I mean, he got a really one swing by the guy who got everybody in Giancarlo Stanton. That was the 3-run home run. And that's really the
That's it.
majority of the damage. That's 3 of the 4 runs he allowed the entire postseason. And also, mind you, that blow up, that quote unquote blow up, those 3 runs, that came when, I mean, listen to how much the Yankees saw this guy. They saw him for an inning and 2/3 on the 15th. They saw him for an inning on the 17th. Then that comes on the 18th, which is the third time they had seen him in 4 days. And then they saw him again on the 19th. And like you said, he bounced right back. Like if you're going to throw 4 times in a series, you might give up a home run in one of them to a team that is, has a couple of a trio of some of the best sluggers in baseball. Like it's going to happen. I think seeing him in these spots and seeing how dominant he was, I mean, this is a guy that, yeah, I would absolutely trust in any spot. I don't know if like the stock really changed too much in my opinion with him because like we knew that he was one of the best performers and if not the best reliever performer outside of his teammate.
Yeah.
But I think seeing him not have that Jekyll and Hyde, not have that be contagious from Clase to him as well. Because I think you could start to say, oh gosh, what happened to this Guardians bullpen? Not really the story. It's more what happened to Clase, maybe 1 or 2 others. But yeah, I think Cade Smith did a good job of separating himself from that conversation.
It's funny, like Sobrowski showed well and Andrew Walters showed well. Like everybody was, pretty much fine and just like, victim of big swings like Gaddis with Soto and Cade with Giancarlo, except for Clase. And it's like, oh man, you're kind of shitting the bed here, huh? So
Yeah, but you see those rings?
yeah, that was okay. Did we talk about that?
I don't think so. If
I
I
don't
haven't
think
talked
we
about
did.
it, you haven't talked about it, then we haven't talked about it.
We haven't talked about it. Emmanuel Clase, after he got blown up for the second time, opted to post on his Instagram story a video of him essentially looking at every award that he's ever gotten. And it's, what are they, like championship rings from coming up in the minor leagues and, like in the Dominican, I don't know what it is, and then like reliever of the year and first team all MLB. He essentially took a walk down memory lane after he got blown up for the second time, like, hey, I'm still him, and he posted it to his Instagram story. Yeah,
Yeah, that was kind of ominous after that. I was like,
yeah.
okay, it's fine.
It's like this guy has no confidence right now.
Like, I mean, I don't want to pile on a guy like, he had such an unreal year.
Yeah.
I just don't know why that's where you go, right? Yeah, so he also panned all of those awards where it was like all MLB, that reliever of the year award, like just panning all of them and said, "Hablamos mañana, good night." Like I have no problem with someone wanting to, remind people who they are and everything like that. But you got to think about the timing of it all. And I think Mason Miller actually brought up a great point on this in Foul Territory. Is like when Mason Miller saw that, he's like, okay, this guy's probably rattled because it's normal to kind of struggle when you're struggling, obviously, especially when you're not used to being able to, or not used to really getting hit like that, especially over the last season. But Mason was kind of saying, hey, like I usually like I wouldn't even be touching social media at that point because you just all the influx of DMs. And I think Mason said something along the lines of like, I can imagine how ridiculously brutal his DMs must be from, angry fans and Yankees fans and whatever. But that's why you kind of put that away at this point of the season. If he's posting that stuff, probably looking at it, probably a little rattled. So that was the only thing. And maybe he's not rattled. Like maybe he really didn't care and just wanted to remind everybody how good he is. But optically, he's not doing himself any favors by doing that and then getting shelled on both sides of that, story there. So, yeah, he might not be rattled at all. Might have just sucked, like it happens to the best of them. But posting that now only validates the belief that it became a mental thing for him.
Yeah, it just kind of felt a little crazy, and like I'm with Mason Miller. I saw that clip too, and it just felt like that was a clear-cut example of a reliever with zero confidence left. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I need to go find it somehow.
Well, it's like it's there. If you wanted to look at those, that
That's
makes all
fine.
the sense in the
That's fine.
world.
Go do
Remind
it.
yourself how freaking go watch your highlights.
Yeah.
But the idea of I need to remind everybody else how good I am, to me shows that somebody's in a wrong frame of mind there, right?
Yeah.
Like that. And like, trust me, we've all been there. We're all at a point where like, oh, like they doubted me and I got to show them. Like, I'm
I
sure
need to remind them that I'm this guy.
I get it. Like I'll circle back and like some tweets at me that rip a take I had or whatever, or like a prospect opinion I had.
Yeah.
But where does that come from? So like probably being a little rattled, a little insecure. So like that's just shocking to me when you're the most dominant reliever through the regular season. I have no doubts that Class A is going to come right back. But yeah, if I'm a teammate, I'm probably not thrilled to see that going into kind of the biggest game of the season. But I think it's a good learning experience, and I expect the Guardians to still be back there. I think they're going to be a threat again next year.
I would think so. It was funny. Peter and I got into a little bit of an argument last night on the show when he said the Guardians were capped because they don't, spend. He said they were capped at this. They were capped at losing in the ALCS. I said I don't agree whatsoever. And he was like, "Why don't you agree?" And I was like, they can absolutely win the World Series with the team as currently constructed. Like just because they don't have a $700 million payroll doesn't mean, or like
Well,
$300
if
million.
they had Shane Bieber, it's a different story,
That
right?
was my point. I was like, you going into the season, he said they were capped at losing in the ALCS. And I was like, I disagree because Bieber, McKenzie's stock was through the roof at that point, too. Like, we were looking at a Bieber, McKenzie, Bybee, Gavin Williams front line. And then you have a Cade Smith and a Gaddis and a Tim Herron blossom like that. It's like, oh, they can do this thing. So it was funny.
And
Like
DeLauder was supposed to be helping this team this year,
I
right? Like
know,
DeLauder
man.
broke his foot for the 48th time.
And
So
Manzardo was supposed to be helping this team for a lot longer than he was.
yeah.
Like,
So, I think, things didn't totally go the best for them, I think, from a health perspective. And they still, I think, did a lot of good things this year, obviously, and took it pretty far.
no doubt. Last thing on Cade Smith, I thought that he entered the Bryan Abreu conversation when it comes to the best non-closer in Major League Baseball. Like the
Well,
best
remember
set
what
of
Brayan Abreu did, in the postseason, and then the struggle is kind of right after that too. That's
yes.
the interesting conversation too, where it's like, how does it look? But I'm with you. I think he is the best non-closer now in the sport.
Yeah, I think it's probably Cade one and then Abreu two. Like I would have put Urseg in that if he didn't become the closer in Kansas City, but that's where we're at now. This guy should not be shocking whatsoever that he made the list. I know we already consider him a superstar, but what Fernando Tatis Jr. did in the postseason was utterly insane. I know that he kind of died off down the stretch, but the entire Padre offense died down the stretch. In 7 games, this guy had 11 hits and 7 extra base hits, 3 doubles, 4 homers, drove in 7. He K'd twice in 30 plate appearances. Tatis slashed 423, 500, 1,000 in 30 plate appearances.
Yeah, and then this goes back to the first postseason, but it was 2020 first postseason for him, right? And that's the only other time we've seen him in the playoffs for a stretch like that. And I think 2020 there's a lot of unique aspects to it. So
Yeah.
you haven't gotten a chance to see him with fans in the seats and all that, and the pressure. And I mean, there's no such thing as pressure for Fernando Tatis Jr. Like it's just not like it's not a problem at all. So I think from him, like, are you altering your perspective on him as a player at all? Of course not. He's a superstar. But I think what is maybe kind of solidifying itself now in terms of a narrative around Tatis is this guy is going to be another one of those players who just rises to the occasion in the postseason. And a lot of really good players just are really good in the postseason because they're always really good. But the way we talk about Stanton now, clearly, and I
Mhm.
think Tatis is going to be that guy for his entire career, where it's like, oh, it's playoff time. He's going to turn it up to another gear. That's what I saw from here. Like he just locked in on his at bats on a different level. I think there's just even the like selectivity is much more prevalent there. Like he just turns into a different player, and he's already a great player. So I think that's the one thing that stood out to me is like, okay, he's now that like postseason performer that you can count on. And I think a huge reason for that is he's just locking in on his at bats a little bit more. He's way more selective. And a guy like Tatis being more selective, like you see the results.
Yeah, no doubt. Similar line of thinking here. Tarik Skubal of the Detroit Tigers. And you can say, like, we already knew that he was the best pitcher in baseball, arguably. For him to take that, 24 inning scoreless streak, two and a half starts in to his postseason, like it's it's the LeBron James, Bryce Harper thing. It's like the expectations were here, and you somehow managed to exceed them. I had very high expectations for Tarik Skubal. I did not expect him to be dynamite until he hit Jose Ramirez with 100 on the forearm. And like
Yeah.
that threw him out of whack. The Grand Slam throws his postseason numbers out of whack. I get it. At the end of the day, man, this guy was the most impressive pitcher in the postseason to this point.
We talk about like Zach Wheeler and his
Yeah.
dominance. I felt like this was the most unhittable I've seen a postseason starter, and besides Zach Wheeler, right, in the last few years. Can you think of on a multiple start basis
No, I think Lester did it differently, and I think Bumgarner did it differently.
in terms of just the like I'm going to bully your entire lineup? It's
Yeah,
Wheeler and it's
and
Scooble.
I think that's totally fair.
And so that's where he solidified him because we see a lot of guys put up special seasons and then, they're good in the postseason. I mean, think like a Cole. Cole has been phenomenal, right? And I know he was banged up to start the year. And so it wasn't like a classic Cole season, though he finished really strong. But even then, like Cole's been really, really darn good in the postseason and it's been really solid for them this postseason. But there was just a level of dominance from Tarik Skubal here where it's like, you almost felt like there was no chance for the other team. And I know they finally clipped one, like you said, when also Skubal was blowing past, the amount of innings he's ever really thrown.
Yeah.
But, I think there's just a level of dominance here that puts him in that, like in a rare group at the top. And we knew he was that good in the regular season, but to see him do that over multiple starts in the postseason, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. A guy whose numbers I think are pretty darn misleading, Sean Manaea of the New York Mets. And I I don't know what your takeaway was when you were watching Manaea
Oh,
in
I have
game
a
six in
clear
LA.
one. Yeah.
I
Ran
mean,
out of gas.
he looked exhausted. Like
Yeah.
he was pitching
That was it.
exhausted. And I
That
thought
was it.
yeah, and I thought Smoltz made a phenomenal point when it came to Manaea. And he said a lot of exhausted pitchers or pitchers running on fumes can get away with using their off speed stuff. And their off speed stuff is going to look essentially the same. Where you see a guy start to lack his fastball command when he is exhausted. And this guy just had no fastball command in that one. And from that crossfire, like he was doubting his fastball until game six,
Yep.
and he didn't have it. And then all of a sudden it falls to the wayside. But I thought what Manaea did leading up to game six was it might have made him $50 million. It might have made him $75 million because he looked untouchable at points.
I was talking to some people about this and like, just like, what the heck does he get? And I don't think anybody knows, but the answer is a lot more than anybody would have ever expected. And I agree. Like the postseason, this is definitely a stock up, just objectively from a financial perspective. He is going to get paid more money because of his postseason performance. He was going to get paid a lot of money regardless, but this postseason performance, that I know, again, I agree with you. Like the ERA may be a little inflated or whatever, but if the season ended on the 27th, right, they don't make the playoffs. His last start of the year was 5 earned runs against the Brewers. Instead, he faces that same Brewers lineup and goes 5 innings of 2-run ball in Milwaukee, then absolutely shoves against the Phillies for 7 innings of 1-run ball. And then that outing against the Dodgers to go 5 innings and punch out 7, 2 earned. Like, I mean, that was fantastic. And then, of course, he just kind of ran out of gas in that last outing. I mean, it validated everything, right? Like, this is a guy that figured it out and I think is going to be a very good starter for several years now. 32, he's going to be 33 at the start of the season, so I don't know how long the deal is, but I think he's getting a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I think this playoff performance definitely made him another good chunk of change.
Yeah. Manaea was the last pitcher that we got to talk about. Two more hitters to wrap us up. It was only 3 games, but a superstar was born. Jackson
Yeah.
Chourio, like the way
Yeah.
that guy showed up, I knew that he was already a star going into this year, but we were talking in Arizona, and I told you we do our top 10 outfielders or our top 10 corner outfielders next year, and Chourio is going to be way higher than I was initially anticipating because at the end of the day, this guy was utterly insane after what, June 1? I think it was April and May. He was rough, and then he was one of the best hitters in all of baseball. And what we saw from Chourio in that 3 game wildcard series was 5 for 11 with two of the biggest home runs you'll see in the postseason that is, shy of the DS. Like those were two of the biggest wildcard moments that you could have asked for from Chourio. And the fact that he was playing a high level of defense in those 3 games too, like we saw what a bought in Chourio looks like. And a bought in Chourio is a superstar, bona fide, hard stop.
It's been amazing. I mean, this was the validate the performance of the regular season kind of thing.
Yeah.
You got extended. You got paid a lot of money before he's even really played in the big leagues for good reason. But we thought it might be a little bit of a slower burn. He turned the corner so quickly through those first couple months, but then to do it in the postseason the way that he did a multi-home run game on that stage, I mean, outrageous. This is a classic validating what we saw in the regular season of like, okay, this guy really is a budding superstar. I mean, I can't wait to see what he's going to do next year. I think this is a guy that, he probably will be the best player on their team next year, which is wild to say because you're still going to have hopefully a healthy Christian Yelich now who looked like he was playing back to his, I wouldn't say prime, but the closest we've seen really since he's dealt with the issues. And a William Contreras, who's arguably the best catcher in baseball.
Yeah.
I think that my favorite to be the best player on that team next year is Jackson Chourio.
And I know that it's apples to oranges, but Devin Williams going to next year, like if you and we lean on Peter for this, but if you put together a top 100 players in Major League Baseball, I think it's a real conversation. Like who's higher on that list, Chourio or
Yeah.
Devin? And I did not think that was going to happen going in. So you
Yep.
say best player on the team. I think I don't want to say undoubtedly the best player in that lineup because William Contreras is a top 3 catcher in baseball. And sometimes he is like firmly the number 1 catcher in Major League Baseball. But I think it's a real conversation. Chourio, Devin Williams, who's the best player. It's almost like
Yeah.
the Herbert Derwin James thing. It's like
Yeah.
so hard to compare those two, but like who's better? I don't know.
Last thing on Chourio. I mean, hitting second in the first game and then lead off in the other two. He had 1 strikeout in his 12 plate appearances. Again,
Yeah.
I know it's only 12 plate appearances, but 2 home runs and 1 strikeout. Like
Yeah.
he was in total control. He's still just 20 years old. He won't turn 21 until March 11th.
Yeah. Another guy, and I don't want to say birth of a superstar, but I think birth of a star is very clear. And we talked about him. You know the name that's coming. Mark Vientos of the New York Mets.
Mhm.
Like this was the concrete birth of a star. Um, I mean, what more do you need to see? I don't really think anything. This guy led Major League Baseball in postseason RBIs this year, and I mean, like we'll see what happens with Tommy Edman and Mookie Betts in the World Series. I would assume somebody passes him up, but in 13 games, this guy slashed 327, 362, 636. That's a 998 OPS. 5 homers. He drove in 14. He was a key cog in that Met lineup, and I was expecting him to be not necessarily a key cog, like somebody good, but
Yeah.
not like, oh, it's Lindor and Vientos. I was going to say Lindor and Alonso and Nimmo and shit, Jose Iglesias and Vientos.
He just always hit a home run whenever you needed one, or whenever they were down, like he cut the lead or gave them the lead with a home run.
That's the
It's
hard hitting analysis. He just hit a
yeah,
home run all the
he just
time.
hit a home run every time they needed it. I mean, I will say this. That I've long been a Mark Vientos supporter and
Yeah,
lover, and I think he's going to have a very good big league career, and I think he's going to be a threat for 30 home runs every single year, and that's what my report was on him. But this did feel like a little bit like he's a microwave hitter to me. So like meaning he's going to have stretches where when he's on, there's nobody that's going to be more impressive than him. Like it's going to be a home run, a home run, a home run, a home run. But when he's off, it's going to be tough stretches. And like if you look at this postseason, like I mean, he struck out 33% of the time and he walked 5% of the time. He chased at a 33% clip. But anything that he could get the barrel to was gone. And I think that's a testament to the raw power. It's a testament to the fact that he can miss hit baseballs that leave the yard. And it's a testament to the fact that he does not shrink in the big moment. And that was a big thing to see, right? Like he's a second round pick, South Florida kid that's always had a lot of eyeballs on him. He's always been a top prospect type of guy and has always handled it well. And just seeing him in the big stage, really not blinking whatsoever, especially as a guy that he's going to swing and miss. Like he'll have a bad at bat here or there. Like he'll get bullied in AB, but now you see him turn the page very next at bat. He knows he just needs one swing. And so seeing him lean into that is why I feel really good about him moving forward. It's like he's always going to strike out. He's not going to walk as much as you'd want to see. But I feel really good about the fact that he's not going to let that pile up on him. And if it's over 3 with 3 Ks, that fourth at bat, he still could go yard very easily. And that's where I've seen that evolution of Vientos where it's, okay, if I don't have it my first couple ABs, I know I can leave the yard with at any given moment to any part of the field. And that's all I need to do once in a game and I'm good. And I think that's what we saw. And Kobe Mayo actually said something somewhere. And I'm looking forward to Mayo having that same progression because I think they're actually very similar players. But Mayo talked about on the call up with us where it's like not letting an 0 for 4 with 4 punchies really like get to him or define him because he knows he's going to get his numbers and he knows that he's going to be productive and just hitting that bat, hit a home run in the 5th at bat. And you got a good slash line still for the day. Yeah, the K rate's high, but that'll normalize. And I think we saw Vientos kind of get comfortable with that.
I think so. And it's really hard to get comfortable knowing that Brett Baty was nipping at his heels. And I think we are firmly there that Brett Baty is a sitting duck on that roster right now. Like I would set the odds of him being a New York Met on February 1st at plus 400. That's kind of where I'm at on that front because like where's the space for Baty? If you lose out on Alonso, I guess move Vientos to first. But at this point, like what has Brett Baty proven at the major league level that makes you think that he's going to be in that lineup? I think what happened here is, and I'm not; those guys could be the best of friends. They've been in a competition for the last 3 years, and I don't think there was a winner until the end of this year. I think it was probably decided on about August 1 or so that Vientos was the guy and Baty had firmly lost that forever. But this just further solidified. It's like Vientos.
That's a great point. That's a great point because from that perspective, it's over now. Like I don't know what their plans are with Baty. I'm not saying it's over for Baty as a Met, but in terms of this being a competition, that part is over. Like Vientos started the year in the minor leagues in favor of Baty. Like it's over now though. Like there's nothing Baty can do in spring training or anything to take away ABs from Mark Vientos. And that is a stock change situation that I don't think anybody was expecting and was 100% hammered home and solidified by the postseason performance of Vientos. An all-time great performance for the Mets in the playoffs. Single postseason RBI record.
Yeah, absolutely insane what this guy did. And it feels like the clear-cut definition of stock improving. We talked a lot of Guardians at the beginning of this. It's the two Mets. It's Manaea and it's Mark Vientos. And those are the two whose stock, quote unquote, rose more than anybody else. So again, the 10 names we just went over: Manzardo, Rocchio, Boyd, Smith of the Guardians, Meadows and Skubal of the Tigers, Fernando Tatis Jr., Jackson Chourio, and then Manaea and Mark Vientos. Last but not least, I don't know how much you know about this thing, but the WBSC Premier 12 roster for the U.S. was announced earlier today. I know next to nothing about this tournament. All I know is like I saw a couple weeks ago that Travis Bazzana is going to be on Team Australia for the WBSC, and I was like, what tournament is this? The Wikipedia definition of the WBSC Premier 12 is the international baseball tournament organized by the World Baseball Softball Confederation, featuring the 12 highest-ranked national baseball teams in the world. The first tournament was held by Taiwan and Japan in November of 2015. I think this is the third time. So in 2015 they had it. In 19 they had it. And I think they're having it in 24 now. And I think it's just the 12 highest ranked international baseball teams and not of like, I think next to no like legitimate bona fide big leaguers are participating in this. Like I saw Yohan Moncada is playing for Cuba. I don't know how that works. I don't know the criteria for picking the players, but I saw the U.S. roster and I laughed. And I need to just read you the notable names on this U.S. roster.
Okay.
Alphabetical order: Eric Adler, Dan Altavilla, Drake Baldwin, Dylan Covey, Justin Crawford, Cam Devaney, Tim Elko, Anthony Gose, Rich Hill,
No, oh my gosh.
Termar Johnson, Willie McIver, Chris Oakey, Matt Shaw, Chandler Simpson, Devin Sweet, Tukey Toussaint,
Let's
Ryan
go.
Ward, Carson Williams.
It's kind of an electric team.
Whatever assortment this is, like I can't believe that I read Rich Hill and Termar Johnson being on the same roster this
Who's
morning. I was like,
more than twice Tamar's age?
yeah, it's like, what do we have going on
Chandler
here?
Simpson's going to run wild.
I
I
need
love
to
it.
I need to figure out a way to watch the
Yeah.
WBSC Premier 12.
Yep. I'm in now. You already sold me.
I don't so my understanding is like the tournament venues, let's see. It's presented by Raxis. I don't know what Raxis is. Didi Gregorius is on Team Netherlands. Great. Um it's in Nagoya, Japan. It's in Guadalajara, Mexico, and it looks like the final is at the Tokyo Dome.
Oh,
Uh, yeah.
that's
Okay, so
sweet.
the Group A is competing in Guadalajara and Tepic, Mexico. Group B is in Nagoya, Japan, and Taipei City, and then the finals are at the Tokyo Dome.
That's
I
going to
don't
be
know what it.
televised somewhere. We're going to be able
Yeah,
to see that.
I don't know what it is, but I'm really excited.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that there's going to be that much prospect intrigue. Looks like we have something to talk about on the call up too.
yeah, we have something to talk about on the call up. So that's what we got, the Premier 12 roster and the guys whose stock, quote unquote, rose the most among eliminated players this postseason. Get your merch. I think Arm's wearing a t-shirt. Yeah, Arm's wearing a
Of
t-shirt.
course I am, dog.
Yeah, my hat's in the background. I'm not
Oh
wearing
yeah,
it though because strike.
classic.
Yeah, strike classic, I
Yeah.
guess. Every link you need is in the episode description. Again, check out Arm's AFL notebook that he put out. He was boots on the ground for 8 days in
Hell
Arizona. He got a
yeah.
triple header in Goodyear, which was sick. We did the triple header, but we bounced around a little bit, so we earned our triple header a little bit more. We'll be back to talk to you tomorrow on Wednesday the 23rd, and talk to you guys.